Thanks. Do you ever get the feeling that you're in a room where there's people who want to change the course of history? Do you ever get the feeling that you're in a city right now that could change the course of history? I get that feeling a lot when I think about Calgary. There is a story I want to tell you about one of my professors in grad school. He was a Texan, but he was from Ohio. And his name was Dr. Jerry Hunt. He's the late Dr. Jerry Hunt. And he was a leadership guru. And I spent a lot of time in his office. And he had a belt buckle collection. And one of those belt buckles was like this big. And it said, "I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as soon as I could." And I feel a little bit like that about Calgary, right? I wasn't born here. My connection to this place is only in the past 15 years, but I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Last night, I was at the launch of the Fluid Movement Festival, which is on right now this week, amazing international dance festival. And I was talking to someone who similarly has moved to Calgary. And we were talking about the city. And in the middle of that conversation, he started to say, "I love this city. I love this city. I love this city." That was odd for someone to start doing that. And I wonder, do people in other cities have the same feeling we have here right now? Do they have a sense that something's going to happen? Have you ever met someone who had such a sense of purpose that they were vibrating, that they couldn't stop, they wanted to share with you whatever it was they had to say? So I think about that sort of thing about Calgary. Do other people do that in other cities? And why is that happening here right now? Are we unique or not? Over the past 7 years, actually 9 years since Calgary Arts Development started and the city created an arts policy in 2004, there's been a series of consultations out in the community about what do you want the arts to be. In fact, earlier today at 1 o'clock, I was speaking to a group of 36 citizens who were randomly selected using a mail drop of 5,000 envelopes. 300 of them sent back in saying, "Yeah, I'd like to be part of that." And we selected 36 randomly to tell us about where the arts could go in the city after this wonderful year of celebration led by my great friend and smartest person I know, Karen Ball. And every time we've done that kind of consultation, 2 themes have come out. And when I did a sabbatical this summer, I spent 3.5 months off. I looked at policies related to arts and cities around the world, and 2 themes came out. And those themes related to the depth of the experience and the intensity of the experience and how far-reaching it was. And they related as well to the width of the experience, to the number of people that were engaged and to how engaged they were in their community, in their homes. And every time we've gone out and talked to people, those themes have come to the fore. So I think there's something universal, especially when I look at every other city around the world, and they're also talking about those kinds of themes, about the role that the arts plays. So I think I can connect this notion of why people are thinking about Calgary the way they are, and when I talk to people about why they want the arts, through a frame that I am going to call the purpose-driven city. Now, the purpose-driven city is, in my contention, the answer to what City 2.0 is. City 2.0 is an interesting phrase to put out there. Does it really mean anything? Is it just about things getting better, or is it something different than that? Well, if there's a City 2.0, there's probably a City 1.0. What is City 1.0? I think City 1.0 is about an efficiency issue. It's about making people safer. So living together makes it easier to make people safe, to have hospitals. Feeding people's easier when they live in cities. It's easier to do research. It's easier to have, grow an economy, to have businesses thrive in a city. but it's easier. It's an efficiency solution. And I think that's really interesting because when I started my work at Calgary Arts Development, that efficiency issue was the dominant thing. How are we going to grow our economy? Well, the arts are important to grow the economy. So because we need to be more attractive to people from other places. So the discourse is about potholes. It's about taxes. It's about fire response times. It's about solving problems that make our lives here easier and better. And I started to feel like, okay, now the arts are part of this. By the way, that's why I hate municipal elections. Because the discourse is about what's happening right here on my street. I want to raise the level of conversation. I was at an event, and this disconnect became very clear to me when one of the gurus, Richard Florida, was talking about all this competition. We got the war for talent, bring people here. Well, I'm one of those people. I have a PhD. I'm from Melfort, Saskatchewan. I don't live in Saskatchewan anymore. And I was attracted here, and I'm applying my human capital here. So what? Am I making the shareholders of the corporations that live here and work here in Calgary richer so they can have bigger houses and better cars? Is that what it's all about? It has to be about more. So that's why we start thinking about, I think, City 2.0 is about a purpose-driven city. A city that knows what its contribution is and can be and sets about making that contribution in a systematic way, or at least in a widely shared way. Kevin earlier talked about his work with Homefront and how the issues of domestic violence are unacceptable. I think in a purpose-driven city, unacceptable is exactly the word. So it doesn't matter if there's 60 agencies and everyone has their piece of the pie. We're going to work together because we will never achieve our purpose if we don't. People can't be left behind in a purpose-driven city. And in fact, we can be an exemplar on how to do that in this kind of a city. What could Calgary's purpose be? That's really not what I'm not that interested in it, but I'll give you two examples that it could be. We could be the place that solves the world's sustainable energy problem. The world's sustainable energy problem. It is a problem. And I know people who work in oil and gas here, and I guess some microbiologists here now, who are working on that. They're here because we are the center of the oil and gas industry. Not just, and I've dealt with people throwing stones at Calgary because we are the center of oil and gas. Well, that's the biggest opportunity in front of us, right? Is to solve that problem. The other one, I'm throwing this out there, we have amazing medical research in Calgary. And maybe the purpose of all of the wealth that we're generating here in oil and gas is to cure cancer or bring light to people around the world or safe water around the world. But it is something that could be a purpose in this city right now. Highest average income, highest level of education, young, a spirit of entrepreneurship. All of those assets, are we going to waste them on making our lives better here now just for us? I hope not. So if I look at our art scene, what's happening in Calgary right now. So this is the big connection I've got to make here, right? How is our thriving art scene, and why is it then when we go talk to people and they give us those two themes every time, how does that all tie into a city having a purpose? So I think that there's a quote here that I discovered when I was doing my sabbatical research from the city of Reykjavik. And I'll just let you read that, and I'll give you another quote that relates to it. Marshall McLuhan said that art at its best is a distant early warning system that warns the old culture what is about to happen to it. Right? So think about this from a political standpoint. This is challenging, right? So am I going to go to a politician and say, you need to invest in the arts so we can keep you on your toes? Is that going to work, that argument? Well, I think in a city, a purpose-driven city, it might work. as an argument because we would be able to have those kinds of conversations. We would be interested in them. And the way that people are telling us they want their art scene to be gives us insight into why that is. The depth side of it talks about being part of an international conversation. It talks about contextualizing what you do internationally. It talks about making a contribution internationally. When we did community consultation for Calgary 2012 in the bid phase of the whole thing, the community talked about depth in the sense that if you're going to be a cultural capital, you've got to contribute something to the rest of Canada and the world. This year can't just be about us looking inside, it's got to be about what we share with the world. And so there were programs to do that. Width, when we talked to people at Calgary 2012, was, I think, what Karen talked about earlier. It was about being engaged everywhere in the city. That's what they told us. We want to do this. They told us loud and clear, number one, we don't want you to put on a show for us. We want to be the show. We want to make it happen. We want to drive. Don't just give us entertainment, circuses and elephants. Let us do it in our communities. When we went out and talked to people about art spaces, what they told us was, we want our downtown, our center city, to be a postcard kind of place. We want our performing arts center and our galleries and our museums there, and I may never go to them, but I sure as heck I'm going to drive someone by them when I pick them up from the airport and say, that's where all that stuff happens, even though maybe not for me. Because they know it's important to be part of an international conversation. It's important to have that voice heard and make a contribution beyond what we do here. And so it's fundamentally important that we invest in our large institutions as the core of that part of what this is about. It's really interesting that Calgary is going to be the home of the National Music Centre of Canada. That came straight out of their own good work, but it aligned exactly with what people were telling us in our consultations. I think it's really interesting that we have the Honan's International Piano Competition here, which is one of the top piano competitions in the world, and it starts next week. People from all over the world. And it's a unique Calgary take on it as well. They developed the complete artist. It's not just piano playing. It's about being able to work with a symphony and a whole bunch of other things, being able to represent yourself, etc. This is happening in Calgary. This is depth that puts us in that international conversation, and we gotta keep investing in those kinds of things. And any city that wants to be part of that world that has their purpose known needs to have that. Width, breadth. Do you know that in 1991, I'm not sure if Ellen's still here, but in 1991, I used to work for the City of Calgary, and the library was my client. And I saw a report that said that in 1991, libraries are concentrated in downtown Calgary. And this must change, because every kid has got to be able to have access to a library when they're growing up. And so they systematically went and undertook a program to build out the library system that we have now. It involves some challenging closures of libraries that people loved. But now, everybody in Calgary has access to libraries. But we have the same situation with cultural facilities. People said, why do I have to go downtown to be part of that all the time? Why can't it be here? Why can't it be in my neighborhood? When I talked to our former mayor about this, I used the example of hockey. If you wanted to develop hockey in Calgary, would you just build the Saddle Dome? No. You'd want backyard rinks. You'd want community rinks. You'd want your Father David Bauer, Max Bell, Canada Olympic Park style rinks. And then you'd want your Saddle Dome. It's exactly the same thing for cultural facilities. People need, kids need, seniors need, you need to not have to come downtown to have a great cultural experience. That's what they told us. And what does that do? Those experiences build social capital. They give us the ability to deliver on our purpose, to not just make it something empty. They are the places where we discuss these issues about the ethics of the things that we're doing in oil and gas. Not in a judgmental way necessarily, but in an open way. And a city that has these things going for it can make that change in the world. We can be a city that does that. I'm going to conclude with a story that helped me see this stuff in one of our great cultural institutions in a different light this summer. So I was on sabbatical at the Banff Centre, which is an international arts incubator. It brings people from all over the world. And through my time there, I was in a writer's studio. I met an artist from Vienna, a cultural capital of the world. And her boyfriend joined her, and they were going to tour Western Canada. And the day before they left, she came to me and said, I've heard about this rodeo. It sounds ridiculous, and I want to see it. But hotels are incredibly expensive. And this is somebody who does really conceptual art, like taking videos in one desert in Mongolia and another desert in California, side by side, of people breathing their same atoms or molecules. So very conceptual artist, right? She's not making a lot of money selling those videos, let me put it that way. And so I said, look, she said, is there hostels? I said, that you can sleep in our basement. That's not a problem. We live in Hillhurst. And so her and her boyfriend showed up at our house on a Friday, the last Friday of the Stampede. And we took them on an informal Calgary Stampede experience, and we took them on a formal one as well. We saw the rodeo and the chuck wagons and all in the grounds. But on that Friday night, we went to Scotsman's Hill and to watch the fireworks. And that happened to be a night that a group of citizens in Ramsey self-organized at a pop-up opera. So the Cowtown Opera sang 4 or 5 numbers, and then the fireworks started. And the fireworks were happening all over Calgary at the time, so you could see them happening. And there were neighbors that brought out mead that they had made and shared mead with us. And then we went back home, and it was a beautiful night. And then we went back home, and on 11th Street, the annual Stampede party was happening on 11th Street. There's straw bales, there's beer, there's wine, there's little kids, there's old people, there's a band playing that they passed the hat around for and made like $500. And I saw the depth of this organization that is worldwide, and I saw the breadth on that day. And these people from one of the cultural capitals of the world said to me, you are so fortunate to live in a place like this. And I thought to myself, yeah, we are. So let's go change the world. Thanks.